Hey, you beautiful beings. Welcome back to Empowered Human with Nina Garcia. I am your host, and we've got a juicy episode for you today. Now, on the surface, we have titled this episode, To Be Topless or Not to Be Topless? That is the question. We're trying to be a little saucy there, but essentially the real question that we are trying to explore, as with every episode, we are trying to transform a hard conversation into a teachable moment. So the real question that we are going to be exploring today is when you have conflict with someone in your life, how much value do you put in what you're comfortable with versus what they are comfortable with? Now, we are going to tell a real story. It's going to be from a couple's point of view, but you can actually answer this question with any relationship in your life. You and a boss, you and a partner, you and a child, you and a family member. Any relationship can actually use the tool from today. Because again, that question is, how much value do you put in what you're comfortable with versus what the other person is comfortable with? And the answer in a nutshell is, it depends on what you value. Individual culture matters. That is going to be the tool for today. So if you are like, individual culture, Nina, what you talking about? Keep listening in. We're going to explore that. That is going to be the tool. But I always tell you a true story first, and I'm going to tell it to you with all of the emotion that I can, right? I'm going to tell you with all of the honest emotion that was present. Then we're going to go back and layer in some educational, logical bits. Yes, we want the emotion, we want the logical bits. And finally, I will leave you with an adventure challenge, something that you can actually do in your life between this episode and the next episode to bring about change and transform hard conversations into teachable moments. Yes? Yes. Okay, so you've got your question, you've got your answer in a nutshell. Grab a journal or a really good friend to dialogue with about what comes up for you in today's episode, because of course, you know by now, I'm always so curious, y'all. You ready to play? Welcome to Empowered Human, the dramatically playful podcast that invites you to heal humanity, the one within you, me, and the world at large. I'm your host, drama therapist, empowerment specialist, and not to mention empowered human, Nina Garcia, and I'm so stoked you're joining me on the journey. Every Wednesday, you are invited to explore transforming from powered to empowered with genuinely human stories of courageous existence, healing from invalidation, and truly belonging to you. So wherever you are on the spectrum, from empowerment curious to empowered human ambassador, this podcast is designed to humanize. Get ready to lean into your edge, heal your worldview, and finally belong to you. This is Empowered Human. Let's go ahead and take a breath on in. Get ready to do some emotional fitness. Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Hopefully you exhaled that out as well and are ready for this. Now, I know I already mentioned this, but just a reminder, grab a journal, right? Be ready to talk about things. I'm going to tell you a true story. I'm going to give you some education, right? Emotional, then we're going to go for the logical, and then I'm going to give you some adventure challenges. Here we go. Today's story is called Forrest and the Cruise Ship Debacle. Forrest in the story is my partner. And my partner and I are talking about, there's a cruise ship that I went on once, and aboard that cruise ship, there was a Saint-Tropez section, and the Saint-Tropez section was apparently either topless or nude. I'm actually, at this point, I'm like, which one was it? I don't know. But for the sake of the story, topless for sure. And we were talking about, if we went on a cruise, the upcoming cruise, then what would we be doing? Would you be able to do that? Would I not want to do that? Right now, this is me thinking this to myself. Would I want to do that? Would I not want to do that? I didn't do it before. Maybe that would be interesting, right? Pause the story here already. Some of the context matters here because I'm a US citizen. I'm here in America where topless sunbathing is not a common thing, but it is a thing in some parts. It's very rare. I would definitely say not a part of the dominant culture. Whereas for those of my audience members who are coming from places in Europe, this is a very normal thing. Entire families go do this, and it is not a sexualized thing. The US, I can say in my personal experience, my lived experience here, it is always sexualized. 90% of the time, right? More often than not, it is the dominant narrative here that it is not an appropriate thing to do. And so me and my partner are talking about this, and I'm thinking about it like, la, 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 my body, do what I want, right? And I have no idea that internally in Forrest is freaking out. Forrest is like, how could you do this? What do you mean you want to do that? Why would you want to do that? And at first, I'm confused. See, in my head, I'm thinking, this is a normal thing in some countries. This is my body. What's your concern about it? This is about me sunbathing. I'm very confused, right? I was very confused about what was actually going on in Forrest. And I thought, we can work this out. We just need to talk about it. He needs to realize that this is some kind of feeling he has. He's clearly feeling insecure about this. He doesn't want me to do this because he doesn't want other men to see my body. I hear him. Okay, but this is my body. It's going to be my choice, right? And I'm really in my feelings about it. I'm like, how dare he? How can he even say that I can't do this? This is my body. I should be able to do what I want. It has nothing to do with him. Really big feelings about this. And at first, I think, oh, this is a deal breaker. That's how intense this is a deal breaker. He thinks he owns my body. He thinks he can tell me what to do with my body. Oh no, right? All my feminist self came out, and it was like, absolutely not. We're not about this. We can't do this. We're not for this. Again, all the emotion, all the feels. At the same time, the Forrest was having his own feels, his own things. Now, because the story is from my point of view, I'm not going to try to tell you what Forrest said or did or how they felt, because it wouldn't do them justice, right? And when we tell stories, and I encourage you to think of stories this way, the reason why I give people different names is not just out of respect for their privacy, but really because this is a moment that I had with Forrest. It does not encapsulate everything that my partner is or does for me. So I encourage you to think about the people in your life in parts this way, that this is merely a moment you're sharing with them, right? And of course, if there's patterns of moments, we're not getting into that. This was a moment that we shared that I'm now sharing with you. We're going to explore it a little deeper. Back to me. I'm having all these feels, and on top of my feminist self, right, very much wanting to say, this is my body, it's not your body. I am also an assault survivor. I'm an abuse and an assault survivor. And so it is incredibly important for me to feel ownership over my body. For those of you who are survivors out there, or you know survivors out there, it is incredibly important to feel that we have autonomy over our own bodies and that no one gets to tell us what to do with it. And so here I am in this moment, really in my feels. And I slowly but surely start to realize that this isn't about right or wrong. This is about a difference in values. This is an individual culture issue. Now I'm going to pause the story there. And I want you to already think about, if you were to put yourself into the shoes of either character of the story, right? Your gender doesn't really matter in this. This is about your values. What is it that you would value if you were put in the situation of being in a arena in which topless sunbathing was an option? Not only is topless sunbathing an option, but it is considered appropriate for this arena. This is a space where they have normalized this. This is a normal thing. It is not a sexualized thing. That's the arena. Where would you stand? Would you be comfortable with your partner doing this? Would you not be comfortable with this? Would you be comfortable doing this yourself? Would you not be comfortable with this? For some of you who are out there, you're like, well, I don't need to be topless. It's not an issue because you've been able to walk around topless. Imagine it was bottomless. Again, not sexualized. Yes, we're transforming hard conversations into teachable moments here. Do go into that space, because there are places around the world where nude beaches is a thing, right? How do you transform this hard conversation into a teachable moment? You have to begin with knowing where you stand. It is easy to get wrapped up in your feelings. Know where you stand. And so here I am in this story, very much wrapped up in my feelings, feeling very protective, very defensive of myself, and maybe with good cause, but maybe not, because all I'm doing is feeling. And so here we're going to go ahead and we're going to factor in some of the logical education bits. You ready? Grab your journal, grab your journal. Hopefully you have at least played with the idea of where do you stand? And maybe you've done this before and you're like, it's not a big thing. Trust me, stick around because we're about to talk about individual culture here. The tool for today, I have said repeatedly, write this down, is individual culture. Individual culture is the empowered human way of reimagining conflict between people. Yes, it is many things, but for today's episode, individual culture is the empowered human way of redefining conflict between individuals. It is a tool that allows people to see individuals as having their own individual culture islands. Literally, I want you to imagine that you've got an island, I've got an island, everybody's got an island, okay? So here we have differences on the islands, differences in individual culture, which lead to different values and expectations on how people, quote unquote, should be thinking, feeling, and behaving. Now, for most of us, we're coming from a powered lens, capital P, powered lens, which means you are looking at this and saying there's a right way and there's a wrong way. There's only two options. You're either right or you're wrong. And for this scenario, that is exactly where probably both Forrest and I, but I'm going to speak for myself, we're coming from. This idea that there's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this. And so once I was able to simmer down with the emotional bits and factor in some of my rational, logical mind, I was able to really think about the parts of this. Well, what is it that I'm not comfortable with? What is it that I am comfortable with? What is it that my partner is sharing with me they're not comfortable with? What is it that they would be comfortable with, right? Really looking at the logical parts of this. Individual culture is essentially this. It is your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, your lived experiences, your family's lived experiences, and then the historical experiences of you and your family. This is important because it means that everybody's so different and we all have our own beautiful way of experiencing the world or hard way of viewing the world, whatever the case may be, right? We have so many different ways of experiencing ourselves and others. And so in the case of Forrest and myself, we had two different individual culture islands that were clashing. Now, your options when you have a culture clash, any conflict you have, right? Imagine it's a culture clash, is you have to figure out what exactly is the part of your culture that is clashing. Now, I am going to go ahead and cast some of these things for Forrest because Forrest is not here to speak for himself. And I'm going to share with you where I was sitting. From where I was sitting on my island, I was looking at the situation and saying, this is not a sexual thing. This is about me being able to own my body, to be, to feel free in the moment, right? And not have to feel encumbered by the stress of who's looking or what, because this is an environment that has stated the expectation is that you are able to sunbathe freely, right? Without that sexualized component. And I was like, oh, that sounds very freeing, very liberating to me. And of course, y'all know we're empowered human here, right? I'm very much about self-liberation. And so that's where I was sitting. I was like, oh, this feels warm. This feels comfortable. This feels freeing. This feels like I'm owning my own body. On my partner's island, what was happening was essentially this idea that my body is a precious resource that shouldn't be seen by anyone except people who were being intimate with it. And so for those of you who know that belief, you feel that belief, right? For me, it's more of a conservative belief, not politically, right? It's just more of a conservative belief. And I have more of a liberal belief, again, not politically, just in this moment, right? In the way that we would view this, one being a little bit more freeing and the other one having a little bit less freedom. And Most people are going to look at that and immediately their brain is going to say, well, there's a right way then and there's a wrong way. And they're going to choose. Well, of course you should have freedom. Or on the other side, well, of course you should have boundaries, right? I think you should have freedom and boundaries. And I think that there are as many ways to human as there are humans. So let's transform a hard conversation into a teachable moment. Because if I had stayed in a powered state of mind and my partner had stayed in a powered state of mind on this, it would have been very easy for me to say, well, freedom is the right thing. And that sounds like too much boundary for me. And that's the wrong thing. And for my partner, it would have been, well, boundaries is the right thing. And that sounds like way too much freedom. That's the wrong thing. Do you see what we did there? Because in a minute, I'm going to ask you to think about a conflict you have and where you are noticing a right versus wrong comparison. It is so hard to get out of that dynamic. What would happen if you transformed it from powered, that right versus wrong, to empowered? Multiple truths can exist at the same time. For those of you who are out there saying, okay, tell me what's going on with this individual culture difference then? If we can say it's not just right versus wrong, but it's different, then what we actually have is Nina feels comfortable with being able to express herself in this way, with being able to be there in the Saint-Tropez section, right? Topless sunbathing, with the idea of it. We'll be clear on that one. And Forrest would not feel comfortable. It would cause him a lot of discomfort. Can we agree that, sorry, just a lot of discomfort for Nina to do this, right? Just so we're clear. Do we agree that both of those truths can exist at the same time? Yes, seemingly opposing, and yet both of those truths actually exist at the same time. I can feel that it is freeing at the same time that my partner can feel that it would be so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable, not freeing, right? Would make him tense up and go rigid, right? So because the logic part is now here, that actually multiple truths can exist, here's where your individual culture comes in. Remember how I said think of you two as islands? If I wanted to solve this issue, my options are as follows. I've got the conflict. I now know, step 2, what is it that we have a difference in values in, right? This is about the freedom versus boundaries, right? That liberation versus boundaries, and deciding what feels comfortable where. Now, if right and wrong are thrown out the window and this is just about differences, what I need to decide is what's going on in my individual culture island versus theirs, and the following 3 options. Do I want to, A, adopt what's going on their island? Do I want to do that? Do I want to adopt that cultural expectation? 2, if not, maybe I want to build a bridge. This means it's a little bit of what I believe and a little bit of what they believe, and we see if we can build a bridge. And then there's option 3. Option 3 is saying, wow, this is a really big difference between our 2 islands, and it turns out we need to step away from each other. It is better that we part ways than continue to tear each other down with an idea of what's right and what's wrong. Let's just agree we're 2 different, and your islands will part ways. Of those 3 options that I just gave you, because we are reimagining conflict between you and someone else, I'm about to go into adventure challenges, and I'm about to tell you what I did in this case and how I worked through it. But there's one more little nugget that I want to give you before we go there. I hope you've been taking notes. Here is the final one before adventure challenges. Individual culture islands have different cultural expectations. I've already said that part. Here's the additional news. It is just like going to another country where they have different cultural expectations. Some things can be honored, and there are some places where you would say, I wouldn't want to visit that country because that cultural expectation is something I cannot honor or would not want to honor, or whatever the case might be. And then you do not go visit that country because they have different cultural expectations. You and your partner, or whoever that other person is in your life that you're having a conflict with, is the same thing. You just have differences in cultural expectations. So as I now offer you the adventure challenge for the upcoming week between this episode and the next episode, it is this. I like to divide adventure challenges up into 3 tiers, right? The first being self-awareness, The second being self-knowledge, the third being self-realization. If you don't know what any of these things are, y'all, click the link in the show notes. If you don't know what powered versus empowered is and you don't know where you are in the empowerment spectrum, link in the show notes. The quiz is in there, you take it, you get some info, right? Super important stuff to know. But let me bring it back to these adventure challenges. 3 tiers, right? From the easiest, quote unquote, to the most difficult. And it goes like this. Your adventure challenge tier 1 for this episode, right? We've been exploring how much value do you put in what your partner is comfortable with versus what you're comfortable with, right? How much value do you put in what 2 different parties are comfortable with? My answer in a nutshell was it depends on what you value because your individual culture matters. I've invited you to challenge right versus wrong, that very powered idea that there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. It only gives you 2 options. Why on earth would you only want 2 options? I'm not sure. Let me give you more. Empowered, right? We're going to empower this. Multiple truths. It is possible for multiple truths to exist at the same time. So, tier 1, self-awareness. Who is present in your life in which you have a conflict with them? Get out a sheet of paper, your journal, your notes on your phone, whatever it is. Name a person in your life who is presently giving you conflict. I want you to write that person's name down. And 1 sentence, what's the conflict? This is the self-awareness portion. I literally just want you to be aware of, hey, there is a conflict, and here's what I think the conflict is. That's it. If you are a tier 1 person and you are like, you know what, I really didn't want to acknowledge that there was a conflict there, and now I see, Nina, there is a conflict there, and here's what it is, then fantastic. Welcome. Your homework is complete. Yes? Between this week and next week, that's it. But if you're like, no, Nina, I know who the conflict is. It's been there for a minute. What's tier 2? Self-knowledge. Now I want you to know more about what you were already aware of. You were aware that there was a conflict. Now let us know more about that and where you stand with that. Your second tier question, for those of you who are exploring it, what is the difference in cultural expectations between your 2 islands? Right? In tier 1, you wrote down the one thing you thought the conflict was. Now I want you to be really specific about what's the difference in these cultural islands. When I went through the story earlier and I shared with you what our difference was, mine was really about a cultural expectation around freedom, and his was really a cultural expectation around boundaries, right? One of them was being prioritized or seen in a very particular way. We could actually say that the whole conflict was either about boundaries or freedom. We just were looking at it from 2 different sides of the same coin. Does this make sense? We have different cultural expectations about the same thing, actually. Freedom and boundaries, right? So depending on how you want to look at it, this is your world. I'm not there to walk you through it, right? What is it that you are saying is the difference in cultural expectations between your 2 islands? Now you will know. If you're a level 2, that's your homework. What is the difference? Write it down, know it, so that you can know where you stand when it comes to this. If you were like Nina, I was aware of the conflict. I now know a little bit more about where I stand with this. Tell me, what's the tier 3? Self-realization. This is where you take thought and feeling and you turn it into action, okay? Action, behavior, tier 3, self-realization. Your question is this. Number 2 asked you about the difference in cultural expectation. Well, for number 3, I want you to ask yourself, is this a cultural expectation that you want to adopt on your island? Or is it a cultural expectation that you'd like to build a bridge between, a little bit of both? Or is it a cultural expectation that you cannot honor and you must part ways with that island? I'm going to give you the example of how I, walked through this earlier right now. When I thought about Forrest's understanding and feeling on me being topless, let's be really clear about that, it has nothing to do with his body, except for the feelings and the beliefs and the thoughts that he has. Now, of course, if I were to stay in a really powered world and really want him to come over to mine, I would say, I want you to be so free, Forrest. I want to feel free about this. I want to feel liberated. I don't want to feel like I have to be afraid or in a box, right? I don't want to feel that way. But because we're all about the empowered human way here, I'm going to walk you through the different options. If I had chosen that one, it would have been me saying, I want you to adopt what's happening on my island, Forrest. I want you to believe what I believe. Are you open to it? That is what adoption is. Here's what I believe. I think it could be good for you. Here it is. If I had not chosen that option, right? And I thought about all of these options. If I had not chosen that option, I could have gone with building a bridge. Now, for building a bridge, it's a little bit of both. So what I would have said is, here's the thing, Forrest. I hear that for you, the idea even of me being topless around other men is so earth-shattering internally, is so painful to you internally, makes you feel so afraid internally, that I really can't imagine doing that, knowing that it's going to bring you so much discomfort, when really this isn't really something I crave in my life. I don't really need this. I can't really imagine doing that. Now, it doesn't change the fact that I think I would feel really safe and liberated on that. I have no problem going topless aboard, right, in a sunbathing section in which that is appropriate. But I behaviorally just couldn't see myself ever doing it now, knowing that it would cause you pain. I would be causing my partner such discomfort. I don't need it in my life. I think I can build a bridge from this. My belief hasn't changed on my island, but the way in which I will engage with that has shifted because you are my partner. And my experience of that has now shifted. My experience of being topless, right, even in an appropriate place, has now shifted. That is one example of building a bridge. The final example, right, was, what if you simply can't honor that? And I would have said, you know what, Forrest, I hear you. I hear that you actually are wanting to be with someone else. You're wanting to be with someone who believes the same things that you do and also wants to behave that way in a very boundaried way. And I can respect that. I don't know that we should be together anymore. It doesn't sound like it's a good fit. And our islands may need to separate. An uncomfortable truth is still a truth, y'all. If you are in this tier 3, right, option of self-realization, really asking yourself, is this a belief, right, a cultural expectation that I want to adopt? Do I want to build a bridge, or do we need to part ways? Only you can make that decision. Only you can make that decision. And I encourage you to honor and acknowledge and own the intense emotions that you have around whatever this conflict may be for you. And I also encourage you to find your cool down time to let the logic in. It doesn't mean that you change how you feel. It just means that now there's space for both feeling and thought. I want both to be on board for you to make as an informed a decision as you possibly can when it comes to conflict in relationships with people you really care about. When I had this very real scenario happen to me, yes, I was floored emotionally. I felt so intensely. And I think on this now, how much I have been able to grow as a partner and as a woman, and as there's many layers on this that I could put, right? As a human being, in being able to consider someone else's cultural expectations. It was critically important to me to be able to factor in Forrest's feelings on this and their thoughts and their beliefs on this, because Forrest is critically important to me. The way he feels and the way he thinks matters to me. And so when I was able to, yes, own what was mine and also explore what was his, I was able to make the decision, not Forrest, not anybody else. I was able to make the best decision for me, to either adopt what Forrest was believing because it was best for me and then best for other people around me, or to build a bridge because it was best for me and then other people around me, or to separate because it was best for me and then other people around me. Empowered human world, we're always trying to put you first because that's the belief that if we put you first and you are thinking about other people, that it will ripple out. but we don't exist in a vacuum, so you can't just think about you. Yeah, you've got to think about you and the people around you. I did make the best decision in this. I don't know if I'm going to tell you. Do you want to know? Do you want to know? I did the build a bridge option. And I was able to sit with that and say, you know, my beliefs on this haven't changed, but the way that I would expect myself to behave has changed. It has changed because I would be deeply affected by how my partner felt in this particular scenario. And I feel confident and secure about that because it was my decision. And I processed through it. So you are out there making your own decisions, and I'm not there with you. I don't know the context of your situation, but I hope that this has been helpful and that you have been able to explore when you have a conflict, how do you know how much to value what your partner feels comfortable with versus what you feel comfortable with? Depends on what you value. Individual culture matters. So explore your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, your own lived experience, your own family's experiences and historical experiences when it comes to your individual culture. And then know where it is that you stand. When it comes to these adventure challenges, I hope you chose tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Yes, self-awareness, self-knowledge, or self-realization, and that you are meeting yourself where you're at so that you can make really informed decisions when it comes to you and the people you care about most. Thank you so much for listening. Click the link in the show notes if you need resources or if you have questions for anything. There is an Ask Me Anything feature in there. Yes, you can literally ask me anything and I will give you an answer in time. And otherwise, thanks so much for listening again. We'll talk soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much for being willing to explore healing your humanity on Empowered Human. I hope you found at least one new way to transform your worldview from powered to empowered. If you took something from the show, please take a moment of your time and subscribe to Empowered Human. And if it really nourished you, leave us a review. Your feedback helps me understand what our community needs. Not to mention, it helps others discover the empowered human life. So keep this last bit in mind. All the visual goodies come with me on Instagram at Drama Therapist Nina. Stay up to date there on upcoming episodes, behind the scenes goodness, and reels dropping knowledge. Thank you again for being part of the Empowered Human community. Until next time, stay curious.